Welcome to Comply or Die, the security, compliance, and regulation podcast powered by OpenSense, where you'll learn to embrace a mindset that prioritizes privacy, trust, reputation, and choice with a single goal: to thrive, not just survive, in today's connected world. Let's dive in.
Hey everyone, this is Jass Binning, host of Comply or Die podcast. I'm excited to welcome another VIP guest, Alan Wilemon. Alan has a rich background in leading privacy at big brands like Stellar Health, Strive Health, ModMed, and he's part of IAPP's advisory board. To use Alan's words, he's your friendly neighborhood privacy pro. Alan, it is great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thanks, Jazz. Cool to be here. Appreciate it.
Yeah. And, we were just talking. It's always fun to share what other guests are from, but where are you based and have you been there your whole life?
Cool. Yeah. So I'm just outside Nashville, bachelorette capital of the U.S., as we were talking about. Not originally from here, just been here almost 2 years. And so still learning it, you could say, but love it here for sure.
Before we actually get into like meat and bread, I've got a ton of questions here related to privacy. I think, especially with your space, I think it's very interesting because most of the compliance professionals that I've spoken to, it's a fairly intimate community when you actually think about it compared to, marketers or sales or another profession. Just a conversation that we've had, even industry organizations like IAPP that you're getting involved in. Would you say that's the case? Is it much more easy to network with other people? Does it feel like more of an intimate community?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess technically, yeah, some of the people that I'm close to in my network, we are representing competing orgs, I guess you could say, right? So you don't get that sense, I think, because traditionally, and maybe it's changing, people in the compliance or privacy risk-based functions, it's almost more of like an us versus them, like the other people we are trying to convince. And so it's a pretty tight-knit band for sure. And so, yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, wonderful. I want to understand, you've been doing this for over 10 years and you call yourself the friendly neighborhood privacy pro. Obviously, it excites you. Talk to me about a little bit about your career journey and what about compliance and privacy gets you excited?
Yeah, for sure. So I started off really doing, as we said, compliance and privacy in healthcare spaces. So literally in the hospital, in the health system. And so I'm doing privacy, a piece of that, but I'm doing other things: physician payment agreements and a kickback statute. And some of those things I just kind of looked at and thought, these things are so boring and someone should do it. Someone else should do them. And so about halfway through my career, I guess it'd be a midway point at this point, I really just said, no, I cannot do these things anymore. Great timing when privacy was really starting to emerge in the US as like a legitimate, full-fledged industry. Had a timing well with California, passing their privacy law initially. And so really just pivoted into that because I really did still care about them. I think most people have some level, and it's not all the same. Most people have some level of an interest in privacy just from their own personal lives, right? And so that probably was a little bit of a spark. And it's just such a newer field. There's legislation coming out almost every week at this point. And so it's just exciting because it's not been around forever. And there's a lot of opportunity to do cool things, to stand out, to kind of make your way. And then I'd like to call myself friendly because I learned early on as well that I'm never going to be the smartest privacy person someone's talking to, or the most experienced, or this is always going to be people like way better than me at this. But maybe I can just be approachable. And that has worked well for me, really leaning into that, not taking myself too seriously, and just trying that angle because I think that can be an advantage, especially in privacy or compliance, risk, whatever it may be.
And I love that angle. And based off of interaction I've had with you already, you definitely are a friendly neighborhood privacy pro and you're very approachable. And I'm actually excited again. Some of the questions I have, I just wrote them up by reviewing your LinkedIn, looking at the comments, and I'm like, okay, this is cool. I'm not in privacy. I'm not in compliance, but it made sense to me. And I think that's the challenge, the unique challenge that you guys have to deal with is how do you make it relevant? You guys will obviously feel that privacy is important and it's necessary, but you're not the only people who are, working in a business. You're having to liaise with business units, right? The rest of the business units, whether it's marketing or customer or sales, engineering, product. How has that challenge been navigating that, whether it was in the previous company you're at or in the future? How do you get the other business units to take it as seriously as you do and also see it as a way to move the business forward versus, okay, this is the reason why we've got a lot of bottlenecks or it's hindering innovation?
Yeah, I think early on I learned, and not because I'm super smart, because I made a lot of mistakes. You really, in a weird way, like you stop talking about privacy at first to people, because I think there's like an innate, like, well, I'm going to be a privacy professional. And like, I've taken the certification, I've read these regulations, and I can like quote them and just talk about article this and that. And I have all these acronyms ready to throw at people. And they do not know what I'm talking about, and they do not care. And it is super boring. And they would like me to just walk away. And so you learn, okay, I need to learn your job. I want to talk to you about this stuff. Not to like the extent that whomever I'm with knows it. I'm not going to be like an ace product manager or a developer or an engineer. But if I can learn enough about what do you do here, like when you come to work today, like what do you think that this company is? And now can I connect privacy to that? Okay, you're a product manager. Here is, don't you hate it when you're managing a product and someone comes along at the end and blows it up and your schedule is shot to pieces? That's what I will do unless we get this stuff invested earlier. Just trying to talk about it in ways that people might care about, because they're just not motivated by the same, just quoting, like speaking a walking encyclopedia. I just quote the regs to you. It doesn't work. I even think a lot of it's boring. You've got to translate it to what other people do. And then they get on board somewhat quickly because we're talking about shared goals. They understand, oh, okay, if we just do this here, I get to go back and live my life and do what I want to do. So I found that to be effective, I guess.
Yeah. Just kind of touching on some of the things that you shared, it's almost, it makes sense from even my perspective and all other business units because you're a part of the conversation early on versus coming in at the very end when product is about to ship or a campaign is about to go live that, hey, here's everything that you need to keep in mind, but saying it in a way where you're there to enable and support. I absolutely love that. And I like your take again, speaking in a language that your colleagues and the other business units would understand versus speaking at them. It's like speaking together.
Yeah, absolutely. The timing is important too. When I'm involved at the beginning, it shows like I am someone pushing this forward as well. If I just come in at the end, I am clearly just stopping everyone else is doing. I might be saying the exact same things, I'm making the same points, but my timing could not be worse. And this doesn't teach people necessarily even to involve me sooner. It teaches people to just avoid me and like go around me. If
Yeah.
that's the only way I operate. So you got to be proactive and invite yourself and be ready to talk their world, and people are cool with it.
Another thing I find interesting from the last few conversations I've had when I was building out Comply or Die, I think from the outside, there's this perception that compliance professionals and privacy professionals and the legal professionals, they're one and the same, right? If there's a lawyer who's here to educate the company on the newest, like GDPR, or the newest change to Castle or CCPA, there's this kind of I think, we think it's one or the same, but from the last conversations I've had, it's you almost have to consult with them. How often do you take that into consideration? So you're not going too much in the weeds, but just extracting enough information that is needed to then write the policy for whatever company that you're working at.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's true, depending like what kind of compliance or privacy pro you are. You might be an attorney, but you might not. You might be like a privacy engineer, like super technical person, but you might not. You might just be kind of a more operational person. So yeah, there are times you got to lean into those other groups, right? And in many ways, it's comforting because especially those groups can be setting a lot of the risk appetites you're going to deal with. Like you are not the one that sets those things. Yeah, I've got my own opinions about how maybe a company should be doing this when it comes to this law, but I don't get to decide now on my own and enforce that out. The legal team going to be having a big part of that. The tech team, they know the stack, they know what is capable at this company. They're going to have a big piece of that. Yeah, I gotta know like what can we do and what are we comfortable with, and that's kind of who we are, and that's how we're gonna move forward. And then I can say, okay, based on that info, here's three things, three ways we could move forward. I think which one do you guys? And we could talk about some of the challenges, opportunities, hurdles, between the three of them, but all three will meet our requirements and we'll feel happy about it. Like there is no need to do all this on your own. In fact, it's going to be a disaster if you try to do it because you don't own a lot of those decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. And that completely makes sense as well. Just to touch on again, some of the regulations, new regulations like GDPR, Castle, CCPA, it means that people have the right to manage how businesses handle and secure their data. Obviously, it's not optional. It's a legal requirement. And there's another layer of complexity, especially when you factor in cultural and geographic context of these laws. When you think about it, EU is more interested in fundamental rights. US is more interested in consumer rights. And then you can factor in China or Brazil or et cetera. How can enterprise brands who are doing business in a global context think more holistically about privacy while respecting the differing viewpoints across geographies?
Yeah, I mean, you describe the scope of what's out there, right? Like mentioning GDPR, got Brazil, got things in Canada, got California. The days of privacy just kind of being a little piece that we got to keep eye on it, just like a small thing. That's really past because huge portions of the globe, we're talking about global companies, those citizens have some form of a data protection law empowering them with some type of rights. So it is like a new reality that most of your customers have some of these rights, probably if you're a global company. And so it's not just something to pay attention to, it is how you are going to do business forward. And so, and again, there's different ways. Are we going to kind of find the best common denominator? We're giving everyone one experience that satisfies the most conservative regs that are out there? Are we going to give people different experiences based on where they live? We got to figure out how to do that, but it's not how we want to proceed. But you cannot just not think about it. Like you said, it has moved up into the realm of strategy. It's how you interact with people today, whether you are a tech company, whether you are selling shoes to people, no matter what you're doing, it affects you. And people are into it. Like your customers are into it. They like these things. They like having the ability to say, hey, so like what info do you have? Hey, do you use automated profiling, decision making to like make decisions about me? This concept that companies have this version of us, this kind of avatar digital selves, just in description that they're just making based on our spending habits, based on what we do, to be able to say, I'd like some input on that. And I want you to fix that or delete that if I'm not liking it. People are here for it and it's not going away. It is continuing to grow. And so back to that question, yeah, it's got to be all the way to the strategic level for companies to approach it. It's not a quick, what band-aid do we put on this? And we go to the next thing.
Would you say, and you've mentioned this before too in some of your posts, and I think we all see it and we feel it. Me as a consumer and as an individual, I also feel it. Obviously, the Western world, I'm in Canada. A lot of my friends and family, they're in US. Um, uh, Trends are changing. People are more concerned, but it usually comes and goes in waves, right? Like recently, everything that happened with Meta, if there's a breach, or now recently, it's a little bit more in pop culture. Are businesses being proactive to that? Are they being proactive or are they still being reactive? Because people like still feel in the Western world are being a little bit more reactive compared to people in the East. For them, privacy is important. Here it's changing. So curious, is it something that do you think is going to continue to come and go in waves, or is there kind of a trend slowly that the world is changing here in the Western world?
I think that's a great question. I would, I'm cautious to say everyone's being proactive about it. I think companies are putting their toe in the water about being proactive about it. Maybe. You see more companies at least talking about it, whether you have Apple or other companies just really wanting to put themselves out there like, hey, we're a privacy minded company. And they'll say kind of why that might be. They kind of will explain this and this is what we're doing to protect your privacy rights. Now it's debatable. Like people might say, like, well, what about this, this, and this? And yet it has been discovered this is a good space to lean into because our customers are talking about this. They're interested in it. And so I think you see companies saying, yeah, we're going to lean into this. Definitely because we just have choices today as consumers that like a generation ago, no one had. Like we can choose who we think is the best privacy partner to do business with. And that could be where we buy our clothes. It can even be what hospital. A lot of us if we live in a major city, you have hospital choices. If you hear about a breach at this hospital down the road, no, I'm going to drive 5 minutes, 10 minutes further, go to this other one because I don't trust this place. Like we just have so many options and people will switch quickly if they feel like you're not a good privacy partner for me. And so, yeah, I think we're just at the cusp of proactive really being the way to go. And we'll see if people really get on board with that. So,
Yeah. And I think that's another big thing. Same with, the reason why this podcast is here. Reputation takes a lifetime to build, and within seconds, it can be destroyed. And in a similar way, trends, right? People's trends and their appetite for privacy and wanting to understand how their data is being used is changing. Enterprise brands also trend. It's all changing. Data privacy laws are also following in many ways a trend. Give more rights to individuals, make the penalties heavier, broaden the scope of the data that's protected. But then in the same context, right, you've also got more technology and cloud and, for a while, blockchain, right? I said for a while, it's still around, but no one's talking about it right now. They're talking about AI. With all this data that is just being just absolutely consumed and created, and data that is used to help create identities of people, make assumptions about people, and used to just, like we saw in the Netflix documentary or the Netflix series, also just running absolutely wild. In what ways can both of these work together, right? The trend of all of this data that is being created and used and consumed and available to brands. And then the laws that are trying to, again, just slap more heavier penalties and use fear to try to get businesses to slow down or enact proper policies.
it's tricky, right? Because in some degree, I think a lot of us, we like some of the things like all the data capture gives us. If we go online and we see an ad on a page we're on, I think most of us like it when it is an ad we'd be interested in. If you're like really into surfing, like you probably want to see an ad for that. If you don't want to see like cowboy boots, yeah, because you're like, I don't want to see that. I don't have an interest in that. So to some degree, like we like seeing things that we'd be interested in, knowing about ways to get it, knowing about deals, maybe about those things we like. But there is a limit, and there is that fear of like, what is going on in the background? Like, what trade-offs have I just made to go on here and see ads that do pertain to me and that let me buy things I like for 10% off, whatever it might be. But what's happening in the background? Have I made a terrible mistake that I have no idea? Because without some of these laws, there's not transparency. I don't know what kind of box companies are fitting me into. And I don't know who that is sold to, what data broker got a hold of that and then passes it off to someone else. And at some point, am I going to try to go make a life decision? But now that that company I'm interacting with, they've kind of already decided who I am through this long winding chain of events and multiple, captures of data. And what I've said, I never would have opted into this if I had known. And I think hopefully the laws push for more transparency. I think as consumers, we have shown the abilities. We know what we're signing up for. We'd like to retain the right to sign up for it, but we got to know what you're doing. And companies have been hesitant to be transparent with that without some push, I think, for regulations.
Yeah. And I think this is the perfect segue into just touching on your LinkedIn post and then that episode, because again, I want to talk about it. And I think a lot of people who are in privacy and beyond, right? It's Black Mirror, huge themes around technology. And a lot of times, I think every single episode is a darker theme and a consequence of technology. You also wrote about it. The Joan is Awful Netflix Black Mirror episode. High level theme of that episode was the erosion of privacy and the potential for exploitation for a society that just continues to be more and more dependent on tech. When you think about people, you think about psychology and behavior and how difficult it is to change behavior. how do you convince people, or how can people protect their privacy without reading the fine print, right? It's not like all of us are all of a sudden going to start, because for a while I started thinking, that is dangerous if pushed to our limits, that is a possibility. And then in this specific episode, and I still mention it, but there's a lot of reality that can come as a result of that. And nothing there is too fictional in the sense that it can't happen. We have the main character, Joan, who she had opted in. And many of us do that every single day, multiple times. I never read fine print. I will always opt in. And I'm sure every single person who's listening to this, minus maybe 5%, will follow the same suite. And on the other hand, we also had the other character, right? Selma Hayek's character, where she had sold her identity. Essentially, she was renting it out for a cost, and she was also being exploited. How do you get people to protect their privacy and actually think about it now in more of a proactive sense versus when it's too late?
That's like the $1 million question, right? Because you're right. We're not going to start reading these like novels of terms and conditions. Maybe like privacy walks will do that. But most people no, things pop up and we just click yes. I just want to get to the thing I want. I just want to watch something. And so there's this assumption that companies would just be cool. And that we still have that, surely they would not do something like this to me. Surely the terms and conditions are just normal type stuff like everything else. And so, that episode is great because it gives you like an extreme example that we don't anticipate is in the near future, but it's not quite out of the realm of possibility. It's not like going full on into sci-fi or something. I guess some of the quantum computer stuff, but you know what I'm saying? And so I think things like that plant that seed for people like, what is the solution? Because I'm not an attorney. Even if I've read the whole T and C's, it's probably legalese. I'm not going to understand it. So how can I just get companies to be normal? And I think some regulators are trying to do that with some regulations, just when it comes to transparency, when it comes to plain language, any regs that try to encourage plain language, privacy notice, or what you're doing with cookies. Do not just use a bunch of legal terms. Just tell people what you do so that the third grader can read it and be like, I guess I understand what you're talking about here. That's important. And, those two characters have really different experiences. And in some ways, like the Selma Hayek character, I feel like her problem is much closer than Jones. Because we really could be in a world soon where someone's going to have a great way for us to monetize how a company uses our data. They're like, hey, just give over your data and we pay you X cents, for whatever byte of data. And someone's going to be like, yeah, that sounds great. Never thinking all the ways it could be used we never intended. We just assume good, well-meaning, a good faith on the behalf of some of these companies. And so I don't think there is a silver bullet yet to really find what can replace T's and C's other than a company stepping forward that takes such a transparent, privacy-friendly, consumer-friendly approach. And they get the consumers and people begin to say, I want that. I want this experience from everyone else. And I'm not going to purchase from someone that doesn't give me the same experience. That will flip it fast when it touches the dollars. Until it touches the money, privacy needs to stay close to where the money is to really have a big impact. And I think that's what ultimately it will take.
Yeah. Yeah. Just even touching on the fact that Selma's situation is a lot more something that could be happening now. And actually recently, I'm sure you follow Andrew Huberman. You've seen his stuff. Yeah. I mean, I'd say maybe about a month ago, especially with AI and AI voice, right? These sounds that he kind of came on to Instagram and was sharing, hey, there's videos of me circulating the internet with using my face and my voice promoting this vitamin. That's not me.
Yep.
That is happening more and more and more to the sense that, we see it and most of us will purchase things at the recommendation of others. In what way is AI actually going to be used to either make it worse for the rest of us, or can companies actually use it for good?
Well, I could definitely use it for good. It is the same. It'd be like if the internet came out today, we would have a real big reservation probably, because we have seen just kind of what can happen when really cool tools they can be wielded and used poorly. And AI is very similar. What we call AI and generative AI, the speed at which something can be produced, even the image and the audio of a person just recreated. Before you'd have to actually film someone, write a script and record it. Now you could just generate it based on what maybe you already have. And so there's potential for that to be used for good if the person is using their likeness as like, yeah, sell your product with my face. Just here's where you send the check. And I don't care. Like, yeah, you can endorse me. I'd rather not come in and record it. That's cool. Everyone feels good about that. But then if companies are wielding it, again, we're still talking company because there's always going to be just like the dark side of tech, just people doing whatever they will do with it. That's got to be considered. But hopefully companies will have a little more restraint than just your general bad actor out there. But you never know. Again, if there's money to be made, people will push it and people will try to do what they can do. And so I think, you know, conversations and regulation is helpful. And it's tricky because anytime there's like something new, whether it's TikTok, whether it's OpenAI, and we have the like cameras on our regulators talking about it and they ask questions, we like put our heads down in shame for some of the embarrassing questions they ask. And we're like, are these the right people to be making the regulations? And the answer is still yes, because that's who we have. We can't expect them to be experts on everything. Like they're experts on AI and experts on carbon emissions. They can regulate cars and they're experts on this over here. Having groups advise legislators, regulators, give them good info. That's really helpful. And then, this is the process we have, at least in the US. And those are the people that are going to be providing some of the safeguards. So you've got to you've got to inundate them with facts and information, how these things work, things we love about them, how they potentially could be used for bad. And one way, is popular culture. It's incredibly helpful to have the cool episode of a TV show kind of give you a whimsical take on like, here's how this could go horribly wrong. And everyone's like, yeah, wow, that was a great episode. But now everyone is talking about it. Everyone is thinking about it. And you've not bored them to tears by just reading kind of like a bunch of legal text at it.
Yeah, and I love that, Nate. Pop culture definitely makes things privacy and data, and it makes it more relevant. Even if you think about everything that happened with the lawsuit against Meta, the only reason why I think majority of people were following it was because of like the hilarious memes that came out of it. That started it, right? But then people went down a rabbit hole and they wanted to be educated. Then they had a feeling where they felt like, hey, is this actually what's happening? I want to be a part of the solution. I want to demand businesses to do right by me. Prior to that, nobody really cares because they're just doing business as usual. And we continue to, again, have this level of trust that I'm sure everything is going to be okay. One of the things you recently shared is technology is never the problem, that you should always account for people first, not tech, when you're writing up the policy, when you're building out the strategy. How do you recommend businesses take a people first approach versus, hey, we've got all these, tech solutions that we could use, and instead they're so focused on that versus actually accounting for people?
Yeah. I mean, the term that gets used a lot in privacy circles is privacy by design. And that is really forcing yourself to say like primary goals of this project, this tech solution, of this product, whatever we're putting together. Primary goals, some of them we are forcing into them are these privacy considerations, whether data limitation, whether considering the data subject rights, giving them privacy by default as their initial experience, letting them opt in to less private features if they want, whatever those things may be, forcing yourselves to put those into your products. Because naturally, if you're building something really cool, your only goals are how cool can this be? How far can we take this thing? What is it capable of? Like what limits can we decide right here? Because these people are brilliant and they're coming up with really cool things, but putting that in the discussion, those things that individuals are concerned about, that those are non-negotiables as well. So it must respect people's privacy. It must be transparent about what it is doing in relation to their data. If you force that in the design of your product, there's nothing that breaks on the back end, right? There's nothing that has to be fixed. There's nothing you have to apologize for after the fact because you already had that discussion at the beginning. It takes self-restraint, right? As a company, it takes you incorporating things in your project. Maybe you were not considering because you just want to make a cool toy, but that's how you do it. I think you have to force it at the beginning because if you build it all the way through, you can't bolt it on very successfully at the end.
I think we just kind of full circle also went back to like our first question, which is how do you make the rest of the business units care? Best way to do that is to make them a part of the conversation early on. So I love that you mentioned that. We're just about ready to wrap up, but curious, especially you've been in the space for so long. You mentioned transparency and businesses who are doing things right. What brands would you say today that you think are actually thinking about privacy and compliance the right way?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't know that I have some that stand out to me a lot, initially. I'm sure there are many that are doing things, they're trying to do things the right way. I don't know that we have like this leader in an industry. We'd be like, look at them. That's the gold standard because even companies that are trying to pivot, they just have they have a history of that's how things used to be done. And they are still trying to unpack that. Even a group like Apple, which is like leaning in hard to we're the privacy company and we're going to talk about it. We're going to actually have commercials that talk about privacy, which has not been something popular. But even then, there's still things you are like, yeah, but what about this and this and this? And maybe they will come along and maybe and I'm not trying to, drag them right now. I think it's cool. Anytime a company takes one step forward towards privacy, it is a good thing. Even if they still have a long way to go, it's still a good thing. I think a lot of the companies tend to be tech companies because it's natural, right? The companies I'd say that have potential to be leaders in the space because they have so much data and know they have so much data. And so companies that want to break through right now, privacy is a way to maybe differentiate to get that competitive edge. And I think we'll see a leader probably come more from a tech space rather than an old school retail space or a bank or somewhere like that. It's probably not where we're really going to see, someone really being a champion for it. But, I don't know who I would say at the top of my head because I think everyone's still close to the best. Because if you step out there and you're like, we are doing privacy great, you just invite people to really check and verify that. And I think we don't have people that are ready for that scrutiny yet when it comes to a lot of privacy things.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned Apple too, because we recently joined IAPP. It's been about a little over a year, but we've been a part of IAPP conferences. And the first conference that we had sponsored, I was fairly surprised to see that Tim Cook was actually going to be speaking at that.
Yeah.
And so at that point, it was like, wow, this is becoming mainstream, especially for some of the biggest tech brands out there beyond the OneTrusts of the world, right? You think privacy, you think OneTrust or Asana, or, some of these new guys that are starting to come in, they come to mind. But when you realize some of the headliners that they had, it just kind of goes to show that whether right now a company like Apple or some of the biggest tech brands out there are using it, as you mentioned, for competitive edge, they are thinking about it and it's still a step in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said.
Yeah. Well, we're basically at the end of the show, but how can people connect with you and what are you up to next? We're going to have Comply or Die come out. You're definitely getting more and more involved. If people want to connect with you, I know you've got a LinkedIn, which we'll share, but is there anywhere else that you're active that people can find you and connect with you?
Oh, cool. Yeah. I mean, LinkedIn is kind of where you can find me and you can find my ridiculous memes and my ridiculous takes on this and that. That's really a space I've just tried to grow over the last year. And so I love connecting with people on there and seeing what other people put on there. LinkedIn is a great space to find cool people talking about interesting work related stuff. And so, yeah, I'm always on there. You can find me at times at different conferences as well. And I try to do different circuits in the privacy compliance space. Again, look for that on LinkedIn. Find more info there.
Yeah, definitely. And for those who are listening, we will share Alan's LinkedIn and this episode. Lots of the great sound bites to come. But thanks again, Alan, for joining me on the show. It was great to have you.
Yep. Thanks, Jass.
You've tuned in to the Comply or Die podcast. If you found this episode informative, we would appreciate it if you could take a moment to give us a 5-star rating. It helps us reach a wider audience and spread the knowledge. Don't forget to share the podcast with your friends or colleagues who could benefit from these insights. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll hope you'll join us again for our next episode. Until next time, stay informed, stay compliant, and stay in business.